I'm Adam in Wales, and this is Board Game Wales Recommends. And today we're looking at a tile placement game. First, I want you to imagine that you're playing Carcassonne, that classic tile laying game, but instead of having a communal grid of tiles, you have your own personal grid, your own personal tableau, and you're connecting up those roads and those fields and those cities. And then at the end of the game, you score your points and see who did the best. It sounds dull, doesn't it? It really does. But not so, because most games that use this mechanism, this personal tableau of tile laying, what they do is have a great central sort of mechanism for how we gather those tiles. And so it is in games like Glenmore and games like Quadropolis. So the players do have their personal tableau, but we have a great mechanism there for how we gather the tiles. Now, this game that we're looking at today, Isle of Skye from Lookout Spiel or Mayfair Games, has one of the best mechanisms for doing that I've seen.
In Isle of Skye, each player is chieftain ruling over a small area of territory on the Scottish island. Throughout the game, players place tiles into their own personal interconnected grid and score points by fulfilling objectives. The scoring criteria are variable, so in one game you might score for the shape of your grid of tiles, or in another game you might be gathering sheep or ships, or trying to enclose areas of mountain or water or fields. In any single game there are 4 scoring criteria in play. The first phase of each round sees players gather income based on the number of whiskey barrels on their landscape. The second phase involves each player drawing 3 tiles from a bag and assigning prices to 2 of the tiles and discarding the third. They need to be careful when assigning the prices, because if other players don't buy the tile, then they're going to have to buy it themselves. The next phase sees players select a tile to purchase from one of their opponents, and then they add it to their own landscape. Finally, the tiles are scored at the end of each round according to the variable scoring criteria, and after a set number of rounds, the player with the most points wins.
Now, that tile pricing sort of mechanism that I mentioned in the overview there, it works brilliantly. It's a really difficult decision. How much is this tile worth to me? How much is this tile worth to the other players? If I price it too high, then they're not going to buy it, and I'm going to have to end up spending the money on it. How much can I afford to spend on it? It works fantastically, and you can see that the whole game has been built around this one thing. But when you throw in those variable scoring conditions as well, now we have a load of replay value, and every round of the game, different scoring criteria apply. So they don't all apply in every round, which means you've got to constantly change your strategies. Not to mention, there is a significant and visible catch-up mechanism in this game. The players who are trailing get a big leg up, particularly in the later stages of the game, as they gather more and more income. They're given more income just for being behind. Now, lots of players will throw their hands up and say, well, that's outrageous. Why are we rewarding players for doing badly? Why are we punishing the leaders? But what it actually does is gives you an additional strategy. If you know that from the outset, then you need to be aware that just because you've got a good run ahead at the beginning doesn't mean that you're going to win the game. And in fact, you need to focus on the later scoring opportunities, not the early ones. That said, if you don't like catch-up mechanisms, this is one of the most visible catch-up mechanisms that I've seen in a game. You're not going to like this game if you don't like those sort of things, and if you feel that the leader should be rewarded and that the other people should just get on and accept their losses. You're not going to like Isle of Skye in that case. Personally, I've seen everyone enjoy that. It's nice to see people coming back later in the game. It's nice to see the tight finishes, the close games, and the sort of frustration as the winner faces that sort of that headwind as they're not quite making the same progress that the other players are, because they're in the lead. So it's a game where you might even want to hang back a little bit, like in Power Grid. I've made a whole video about this recently, about catch-up mechanisms, so go and have a look at that. In fact, I've also made a video about tile-laying games, so you could have a look at that one as well. I mentioned previously the game Glenmore. Now, Glenmore is a game that has exactly the same theme. I mean, exactly the same, right down to the whiskey barrels on the tiles. But Glenmore doesn't have the beautiful Clemens Franz artwork. Clemens Franz is the illustrator who did Agricola and many, many other games. I've placed a lot of them behind me on the shelves here so that you can see. And Isle of Skye really captures that feel as well, albeit the images here are much smaller than in many of his games. game, so you have to sort of really have a close look to see those little cows and sheep and lighthouses and what have you. But they're done in his style, and so it fits very well into that family and has that atmosphere of countryside and farming, which feature in so many of his games. That said, I call it an atmosphere because there is no story here, there is no theme. I mean, no theme. It makes no sense what we're doing here. Why are we paying for these tiles? Who are we paying? Why do I receive income for them? Why do I set the value for them? What do these scoring criteria mean? Why am I scoring points for this and that? You have to ignore all of that and get into the mechanisms and the puzzle of it all and just let the atmosphere sort of wash over you. But don't look for story here. You won't find any. This is a simple game, okay? It won the Kennerspiel des Jahres, which is the game for connoisseurs, the gamer's choice. And it is a step up from things like Carcassonne and the like, but not a big step. A good next step, I would say. So this is by no means complex. It's not going to take you a long time to play, although there is room for a little bit of analysis paralysis with more players. A lot of that is simultaneous, though, when we're setting the values of our tiles. People are doing that simultaneously. But when also when choosing to purchase tiles, you might find that players spend a long time looking around at all the other tiles that players have laid out, particularly in a 4 or 5 player game. So it might be a game that's better played at 3 players, maybe 4. The 2-player game works very well, actually. I was quite impressed with the 2-player game. So, all in all, I thought it was a worthy winner of the Kennerspiel des Jahres. I think it's well worth anyone picking up. It's a nice package, it's nicely produced, the components are good, the artwork's lovely, and the mechanics are ingenious. If Glenmore, I think Glenmore is due a revival at some point. If it comes back with beautiful graphics like this, then the two of them will sit comfortably alongside each other as 2 of the best tile laying games around, and they just happen to have exactly the same theme. So, that's Isle of Skye by Lookout Games and Mayfair. I'm Adam in Wales. Thank you very much for watching my video. If you want to subscribe to my channel, it's Board Game Wales, Adam's Board Game Wales, or you can follow me on Twitter at Board Game Wales. On Board Game Geek, I'm Adam78. Thanks very much for watching. All the best.